Hi everyone, and welcome to another review on this channel. And this review is special because it's of a very new flagship of the Audeze LCD-5. Quick disclaimer, I bought the LCD-5 with my own money. I bought this from a dealer in Texas. His name is Nathan. A big shout out to Nathan for great service and very quick turnaround time with this. So this review is going to be like most of my other reviews where I talk extensively in terms of comparisons to the Susvara, which a lot of people are comparing the LCD-5 to. The base 12665 TC, which I don't think enough people have, or a lot of people have compared yet to the LCD-5, and I have the SR009S, the Stax headphone over there, and the RAL SR1A, which I'll also draw comparisons to, and also the Utopia, which I don't have at present, but I'll try to draw comparisons of memory. So without further ado, just to jump right in, aesthetics, build, and comfort-wise, super light headphone, guys. You've heard this before, but it's really, really light, and it matters because I feel like because it's such a great sounding headphone. It works with all genres. That's a takeaway of this review. It's a great sounding headphone that works with all genres and is super light and comfortable. The comfort, I think, has divided some people. I think people who say they have a very large head have found this uncomfortable, but then the same people have come back after a day or two and said that this is fine for comfort. And I'm from the camp. First of all, the large noggin camp. I have a huge head. I'm convinced my head is bigger than most reviewers and most human beings. But that said, I think I'm from the camp that finds this comfortable off the box. It didn't require any break-in for me to find this comfortable. It's supremely comfortable. It's super light, like I said. The leather ear pads are beautifully sculpted. They remind me of and have reminded others of the Abyss Diana headphones in the way in which they're sculpted and angled. And I didn't require, like I said, any break-in for this to be comfortable in my head. Build quality, it's premium looking, as is the case for any Audeze headphone. It looks the price. Very few headphones look the price, unfortunately. The Abyss 12665 TC does. Susvara does not at all. The Stax headphones do not usually look the price. This does, and it's no surprise. And obviously Audeze has made concessions and trade-offs to keep this light, so you don't have the wood lining anymore, you don't have the wood material anymore, you have resin, which is lighter. And as will be the theme throughout my review, there's a lot of trade-offs in this headphone design and execution, which I think works for me. It does a great job. Summary, wonderful headphone, go and get it if you're looking for a TOTL planar magnetic headphone and you don't want a specialist like a TC or a Susvara. Now, to dive deeper into this review. So what do I mean by specialist? So most people who buy the Susvaras, and if it's their first headphone, which was the case for me, the first top of the line headphone, I was convinced the Susvara is the most well-rounded headphone on the planet. There are people who buy the TC first and think that's the case with the TC. The fact is, they're both well-rounded headphones, the TC and the Susvara. They both do bass, treble, mid-range well. Obviously TC does, I think, bass much better, and the Susvara does mid-range much better. The treble is a toss-up between the two. But I think once you hear the TC bass, the Susvara bass will sound very inadequate. It didn't until I bought the TC. Once you buy Susvara, after you buy the TC, the mid-range might not work as well, especially with the vocal-centric genre, because it's not as sweet. You can watch my Susvara TC comparison review that I posted on this channel earlier. So that's where the LCD-5 comes in. It, in many ways, combines the good of both, not the best of both, but the good of both. To jump right into tonality, the bass is wonderful. It's succulent. It's present. It's fast. It's detailed. It's slammy. It's a wonderful bass. It's the LCD-4 bass. Except it won't sound like the LCD-4 bass often because the tonality is different. This has ear gain and a decent amount of ear gain. It's not as airy, or it doesn't have as much energy, the air frequencies, as the LCD-4 does in balance. So what that means is, I think what you find is that the bass is, like I said, wonderful, like super good. But it's not as much a bass headphone as the LCD-4 is. The bass is far better than the Susvara's bass. Easily defeats Susvara for bass. It's not completely at the level of the TC. It rivals the TC for bass quality in terms of details, in terms of texture, in terms of decay. But I do think the TC has more bass energy and impact, and in a certain way, I think I keep preferring the TC for bass, even over this. while this has great bass. Mid-range wise, it has the emotional mid-range that we all crave, but it doesn't add any extra sweetness to the mid-range. So for instance, I'm quite convinced the Susvara adds a bit of sweetness to the mid-range. You know how when you look at a photo and you can have an oversaturated photo with the Susvara, it's not an overly sweet mid-range, but it is a sweet mid-range. And it does sometimes remind me of the HD650, which is also another very sweet sounding headphone and which had over time started boring me. The TC is at the other end of the spectrum where the mid-range is somewhat dry and recessed. So, I mean, initially when I used to listen to jazz vocals of the TC, I didn't like the TC. But then I needed to rediscover hard rock and metal. And since then, the TC has been this amazing, grandiose, dramatic ride. This headphone for mid-range is not the sweet mid-range of the Susvaras, but it's not the dry mid-range of the TCs. It's just a neutral mid-range. This is what a mid-range should sound like. It gives you what's in the track. It's detailed, it can be emotional when the track calls for it, it can be just there in the mid-range when the track calls for it. So overall, I give it a high mark for mid-range. Treble-wise, when I first saw the frequency, just one more word about the mid-range. The upper mid-range, when I first saw the frequency response, I thought it would be shouty, but it hasn't been shouty for me. It's possible that my Hollow Audio Maniac has had something to do with it, because a lot of people whose tastes I trust, some of them have found this mid-range shouty, upper mid-range, others have not. I'm from the camp where it's not shouty, and I can be sensitive to shouty upper mid-ranges. To give you an example, the HD650, the Sennheiser HD650, can come off as shouty to me. So that's it for mid-range. Treble-wise, my friends, you have a wonderful headphone here, which is not dark sounding, not warm sounding. You have plenty of treble energy and detail without ever being sibilant or sharp or harsh. This is, if you are sensitive to sibilant, this is safer for you than the Susvara. The Susvara isn't sibilant to me, but it has a ton of air frequency energy, and it can come off as bright to a lot of people. It does. It doesn't to me, but it does to a lot of people. And if you A/B this and the Susvara, you'll get more air frequencies with the Susvara, so you'll hear vocals breathing more or air around instruments more. But it can come off as brighter than the LCD-5, and for that I give this great marks. And also another word, it doesn't sound the treble on the frequency response because of this wonderful planar magnetic technology Audeze has developed. It's an innovative company. The FR and the treble on the FR might come off as muted, but it doesn't when you hear it. So that's it for tonality. In terms of technical performance, it's right up there. For detail retrieval, it's right up there with the Susvaras. The TC and the SR1A, which I have over there, and the Stax SR009S, which have the corner on top, are more resolving. The SR1A to me is more resolving than even the HU1, which I heard recently. And I've posted reviews in different places. But this is top of the line for detail retrieval. Now for dynamic slam and impact and overall tactility, which a lot of you like, which translates to a harder hitting bass, a more realistic kick drum, or a more biting riff in a rhythm guitar. So for all that, for the sense of tactility, which makes music come alive, which speakers do very well, Audeze has always been famous, and they will not disappoint you this time either. This is a very tactile sounding headphone. The track calls for it. It just sounds the right amount of tactile. I love how tactile this is. It's not as tactile as the TC, which is enormously tactile. The TC is just a thumping, loud headphone, which reminds me of Focal speakers. Speaking of Focal headphones are also very tactile, and I do think Utopia might be slightly slammier than this, but this is bassier than Utopia. So overall, if you like bass, the combination here of the tactility and the bass makes it beautiful. I need to draw a comparison to the LCD-4 when talking about its tactility. The LCD-4 is tactile more frequently than this on even tracks that perhaps don't call for tactility at the level at which the LCD-4 delivers tactility and bass. However, this I think is just right. Soundstage and imaging wise, as you might have heard, that this does not throw the widest stage, and some people have said the Susvara has a wider stage and therefore Susvara might be a superior headphone, etc. The TC definitely has a wider stage. The SR009 has a deeper stage, and the SR1A has both a wide and a deep stage. Now, I feel like in audiophilia, there can be a tendency to sort of conflate staging capabilities with how high-end a headphone sounds, and detail retrieval capabilities with how high-end a headphone sounds. To my mind, while this is on par with the Susvara for detail, it's slightly less wide than the Susvara, but in many ways, I do like this staging here more than the Susvaras, and I'll explain why. I need to put this down so I can sort of draw or gesture to give you a sense of the staging. The LCD-5 stage is wide, but more importantly, it throws a stage in front of you, right? And it's a very fleshed out arc. I really like that. It's fairly deep. It's not as holographic as the Stax headphone over there, but it's deep enough, I think. And interestingly, on tracks, when the track calls for it, you place images out of your head, which gives it a realism that I think only the TC and the SR1A has. The Susvara has a slightly wider stage. However, the Susvara does something which I don't enjoy as much anymore, and it reminds me of the HD650. On some tracks, the Susvara vocals sound right up your ears. It's still a wide stage, don't get me wrong, but the placement of images in the Susvara, in some ways, is I think less credible than on the LCD-5 on some tracks. When I was playing Tool's Fear Inoculum, for instance, on many tracks, which is I felt the soundstage and the images were slightly more out of my head in the depth sense on the LCD-5 than on the Susvaras. However, there are tracks on which Susvara sounds wider, and the LCD-5 just doesn't sound a little closer to you. It's hard to describe, guys, but I think overall, I like what this is doing. It's a very different take on staging and imaging. And overall, for staging and imaging, I think it's on par with the Susvaras. I just mentioned how some qualities of headphones make it sound more premium. And of course, I want to talk about timbre, but I just want to very quickly say that this sounds as premium as any of these flagship headphones I have over here. Unless you're indexing massively for a stage, in which case you might as well get the raw SR1A with the subwoofer like I do. Insanity that, a lot of you might not want to get into. That said, timbrely, this headphone doesn't do anything wrong or particularly right. I do think this is where a mid-range timbre is more realistic. The bass timbre of the Audeze headphone is LCD-5 is more realistic. This is where our bass sounds very slippery. It's almost a swoosh, I feel like sometimes. And I sense this more and more after the more longer listen to the TC. And I've tried all kinds of speaker amps, guys, and DACs with the Susvara, so it's not an amplification issue. Bass-wise, I do think, and timbre-wise, Susvara is wonderful, but I used to think that Susvara was the king of timbre, but over time I've come to the realization, and I reserve the right to change my mind, because that's the fun of the hobby, right? I think timbrely, this is a very evenly timbred headphone. Timbrely is very even, and it's more even than I think the TC or the Susvara. But overall, I would put it, I would say it's fine for timbre. It doesn't sound as natural as a ZMF headphone does, or other dynamic drivers, like even the Sennheiser HD800 or the HD650, barring some parts of the frequencies where the HD800 doesn't sound as natural in the bass, for instance. But overall, no problem with timbre. Quick comparison. So if I had to rank my favorite headphones, this is up there, guys. This is up there with the TC nowadays. I think this is up there with the TC and the SR009S, which is one of my favorite headphones. I can't tell you which I like the most. I'll do a longer term, in a few weeks, I'll do a video where I compare all these headphones and do a shootout, and I won't get into this sort of a breakdown of technical and tonal parameters. I'll just compare these headphones, right, and rank them for you. I'll also throw in the Utopia and the Celia, so watch out, keep an eye out for that video. But I do want to say that this has already become one of my favorite headphones. I might prefer to the Susvaras. I certainly prefer to the Utopia, which I've heard many times and also recently. I like it more than the Celia. I like it more than most headphones. The two headphones that I wouldn't perhaps trade for this are the TC and the SR009S. The RAL is in its own category. I use it with the subwoofer, almost in a speaker-like setting, because I put the flaps out, and that's a whole different ballgame. I'll cover that in a different video later. But that said, guys, if you are looking for the one flagship headphone and no other, if you want to buy one flagship headphone that does everything, that plays well with every genre, because I've thrown every possible genre at it. I've thrown heavy metal and hard rock at it. I've thrown jazz vocals at it. I've thrown female vocals at it. I've thrown alternative rock at it. I've thrown psychedelic stuff. Electronic, of course, even hip hop, which I don't listen to a lot. It's fine if you do. I think it's cool if you do. I don't. And even hip hop sounded very enjoyable of this headphone. This is a do-it-all headphone. I do think it's the closest we have to a perfect TOTL planar magnetic headphone, hence the title of the review. But other headphones do other things better. Like I said, the TC does detail is better, the Susvardo's vocal is better, the Raldo's staging better, the SR-209 is a speed better. But if you're looking for the perfect compromise, the perfect balance of trade-offs, I think Audeze has hit the ball out of the park, and they deserve great praise for the LCD-5. Wonderful headphone, guys. If you have further questions about this headphone and want to talk about gear synergies and what have you, I have, by the way, I just want to quickly finish off this review by talking about amplification and DACs and so forth. I've driven this off my Moon amp, the H80, which is a pretty famous amplifier. I've driven it off. I've used their DAC. I've used the DAC of the Hall Audio Mate, which is a standalone DAC, which I own and I love. It's timbrely very natural sounding. And I've also run the LCD-5 of my Accuphase E380 speaker amp. I've used both the speaker taps and the headphone out. Amazing amp, it makes everything special. I've tried this off my Prima Luna headphone out. I've tried this off this i5 Pro IDSD that I have over there. So I've tried this off a bunch of things. It's not extremely hard to try, but it does scale with amplification, as is the case with most planar magnetic headphones. Yeah, so I mean, I hope this was useful. If you have any further questions, if you want to probe any of these things that I've discussed, write me. I'll drop my email address in the description. And of course, I have a thread on Headphone. It's called Amplify Micro Reviews. And I do also write for a few other platforms. So keep an eye out and subscribe to this channel if you like this video. I have a lot more coming up. And yeah, that's it. Stay safe. I'll see you again soon. Bye.